You're terrified of shark attacks, but you drive without a seatbelt. You panic about plane crashes, but ignore your high blood pressure. You worry about stranger danger, but text while driving. Your brain is completely ignoring probability and making you fear harmless things while you casually risk your life doing actually dangerous stuff. Here's a question. What's more dangerous? Terrorism or heart disease? Obviously, heart disease kills way more people. But which one scares you more? For most people, it's terrorism. This is neglect of probability. When you judge risk based on how scary something feels instead of how likely it actually is. Your brain focuses on dramatic, unlikely dangers while ignoring boring, common dangers. And this isn't just about irrational fears. It's affecting your actual decisions in ways that are making you less safe, wasting your money, and completely distorting how you see the world. Neglect of probability happens when you make decisions about risk without considering how likely something actually is. You focus entirely on how bad something would be if it happened, ignoring the crucial question of how often it happens. A scary outcome captures your attention and drives your behavior even when the probability is tiny. Meanwhile, high-probability risks that aren't dramatic get ignored. This happens because your brain evolved to respond to immediate vivid threats, not to calculate probabilities. If your ancestor saw a predator, the right response was fear and action, not stopping to calculate the statistical likelihood of attack. Dramatic threats trigger emotional responses that override rational probability assessment. Your modern brain still works this way, reacting emotionally to vivid scenarios while ignoring the math that would show what's actually dangerous. The problem is, modern life is full of risks that need probability thinking, not emotional reactions. You can't rely on gut feelings about danger because your gut is terrible at probability. It makes you afraid of things that barely ever happen, while you casually do things that kill thousands of people every year. Neglect of probability is making you waste resources protecting yourself from tiny risks while leaving yourself exposed to big ones. Let me show you where this goes wrong. Air travel fear is the classic example. Many people are terrified of flying. Plane crashes are dramatic and terrifying when they happen. But flying is statistically incredibly safe, safer than driving by far. Yet people who are scared of planes will happily drive long distances, which is way more dangerous. They're neglecting probability and reacting only to how scary plane crashes feel. The same thing happens with terrorism fears. After terrorist attacks, people change their behavior dramatically. They avoid crowds, cancel travel plans, buy security systems. But terrorism kills very few people compared to common causes of death like car accidents, disease, or accidents at home. The dramatic nature of terrorism makes people neglect the probability, which is tiny, and overreact compared to actually likely dangers they ignore. Shark attacks get massive attention every time they happen. People avoid ocean swimming because of shark fear. But you're way more likely to die from drowning in a pool or getting struck by lightning than from a shark attack. Sharks kill less than 10 people per year worldwide. But the dramatic imagery of shark attacks makes people neglect how incredibly rare they are. Stranger danger fears make parents terrified of letting kids play outside unsupervised. Child abduction by strangers is extremely rare. Kids are in much more danger from car accidents or household accidents. But abduction stories are so scary that parents neglect the probability and restrict kids' freedom to protect them from a threat that barely exists while driving them places constantly, which is actually more dangerous. Disease fears show this backwards. People are terrified of rare diseases they hear about in the news, but ignore common diseases that actually threaten them. Someone panics about Ebola or rare infections, but doesn't worry about heart disease or diabetes. The dramatic disease gets the attention even though the probability of it affecting you is nearly zero, while boring, common diseases that will probably kill you get ignored. Lottery playing is neglect of probability in action. People know the odds of winning are terrible, But they play anyway because they focus on how amazing it would be to win instead of on the probability. The vivid positive outcome makes them neglect the math showing they're essentially throwing money away. Investment fears work the same way. People are terrified of stock market crashes because crashes are dramatic and scary. So they keep money in savings accounts earning nothing, losing value to inflation. The guaranteed slow loss to inflation doesn't trigger fear because it's not dramatic, even though it's far more likely and certain than a crash wiping them out. Medical decisions get distorted by probability neglect. Someone hears about a terrible side effect from a medication and refuses to take it, even though the side effect is incredibly rare and the disease the medication treats is actively hurting them. The vivid, scary side effect captures attention, the probability gets neglected, and they make a decision that makes them worse off. Product safety fears follow this pattern. A dramatic product recall makes people avoid an entire category of products, even though the defect affected a tiny percentage and similar products are statistically safe. Meanwhile, they use products with much higher injury rates because those injuries happen gradually and are not dramatic news stories. So, how do you stop neglecting probability? How do you assess risk accurately instead of reacting to dramatic scenarios? First, always ask, how often does this actually happen? When you feel fear about something, look up the actual statistics. How many people does this affect per year? What's the real probability? Numbers ground you in reality instead of letting dramatic imagery drive your thinking. Second, compare risks to each other. Don't think about risks in isolation. When worried about plane safety, compare it to driving safety. When worried about terrorism, compare it to heart disease. When worried about stranger danger, compare it to accident risks. This forces probability thinking instead of emotional reaction. Third, look at base rates for your situation. General statistics matter, but your specific risk factors matter more. If you're young and healthy, your risk of heart disease is lower than average. If you're old, it's higher. Tailor probability thinking to your actual situation instead of reacting to general dramatic scenarios. Fourth, notice when fears are driven by recent news. Neglect of probability gets worse after dramatic incidents make news. If you're suddenly worried about something right after seeing news coverage, recognize that's probably probability neglect, not a real change in your risk level. Fifth, think in terms of comparison to everyday risks. You do hundreds of activities every day, most with tiny risks that you accept without thinking. New fears should be compared to those baseline risks. Is this scarier thing actually more dangerous than driving, crossing streets, or using stairs? Usually no. Sixth, focus protection efforts on high-probability risks. You have limited time and money for safety measures. Spend them on things that are actually likely to hurt you. Wear seatbelts, maintain your health, prevent falls, avoid distracted driving. These boring interventions prevent common risks. Don't waste resources on dramatic rare risks while ignoring common ones. Neglect of probability is making you afraid of the wrong things and careless about actual dangers. You react emotionally to dramatic scenarios without considering how likely they are. Plane crashes, terrorism, shark attacks, stranger abduction, these capture your attention and drive your behavior even though they're statistically tiny risks. Meanwhile, you ignore or accept risks that are far more likely to actually harm you because they're not dramatic or newsworthy. This isn't just about irrational fears. It affects real decisions that impact your safety and well-being. When you avoid flying but drive instead, you're choosing the more dangerous option. When you worry about rare diseases but ignore common ones, you're focusing health efforts in the wrong direction. When you spend money protecting against unlikely threats while ignoring likely ones, you're wasting resources. Understanding probability neglect helps you make better risk decisions. It helps you recognize when fear is based on drama instead of likelihood. It helps you focus protection efforts where they actually matter. It helps you ignore media hype about rare dangers while taking seriously boring, common dangers. The next time you feel fear about something dramatic, pause and ask about probability. How often does this actually happen? Am I reacting to vivid imagery or to real likelihood? What are the common risks I'm ignoring while I focus on this dramatic, rare one? Those questions help you escape probability neglect and think clearly about actual danger. Your brain wants to react to drama and ignore boring statistics. But drama and danger are not the same thing. The most likely risks are often the most boring ones. Real safety comes from focusing on probability, not on whatever captured your attention most recently. Subscribe to learn about more probability biases distorting how you assess risk and make decisions.